In this video, I want to expand on that idea of coalitions of convenience. The idea that people with different interests join a coalition, in this case, a political party, not because they all see the world exactly the same way, or that they even have the same interests, right? That they're joining because it becomes convenient for them to do so in order to win elections, in order to get a plurality. So I'm going to put this question out there for anybody who's a member of the Democratic Party. I just want you to think about this honestly. Um, what I'm about to say applies to most members of the Democratic Party, certainly not everybody, but generally speaking, members of the Democratic Party, to varying degrees, support laws that restrict access to guns or to ammunition, right? So they frequently will want to restrict access to what are referred to as military assault style weapons, large magazine clips that allow somebody to shoot multiple rounds at one time. Democrats also tend to oppose restrictions on access to abortions, right? That they strongly support a woman's right to choose. It doesn't mean that they believe that somebody should be able to get an abortion, as the baby's coming out of the, being born, but that generally speaking, attempts to restrict access to abortions, Democrats oppose. In the midst of the pandemic, Democrats were much more likely to support mask mandates at schools, right? Just as a general rule. Again, doesn't apply to everybody. And then I think as time went on, you started to see more people of all ideological, party views have more and more problems with mask mandates. And they tend to oppose voter identification laws. Okay, so if you're a Democrat, or if you think you're a Democrat, ask yourself, is that accurate? Now, in class, usually most Democrats, when I bring this up to most Democrats, they'll say they agree oftentimes with all of that. Sometimes they'll say 3 out of 4, something like that. And so I'll ask them the same question, and I want you to ponder this. What is the connection between these 4 particular issues? Now, there are many more that I could have written down, but I just picked out these 4. What is it about supporting laws that restrict access to guns and ammunition that makes someone also more likely to oppose restrictions on access to abortion? And what's the connection between opposing restrictions on access to abortion and mask mandates? Right? What's the connection? What is it that connects all these things? And then what's the connection between all this and opposition to voter ID laws? They seem to me like they're sort of disparate ideas, not necessarily connected by one unifying theme. Why, if they're not connected in any kind of way, do Democrats, generally speaking, all believe this? Now, before Democrats answer this question, now I want to talk to Republicans. If you identify yourself as a Republican, again, this isn't true for everybody, but most members of the Republican Party oppose laws that restrict access to guns and ammunition. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they believe that people should have, surface-to-air, launchers, or that people should be able to have hand grenades around their house. But in general, they tend to oppose laws that restrict access to guns and ammunition because they're strong supporters of the Second Amendment. They tend to support restrictions on access to abortions. Again, it doesn't apply to everybody, but it applies to many Republicans, and I think in this particular case, probably more religious Republicans and maybe older Republicans as well. They tend to oppose mask mandates at schools during the pandemic. Now, I don't know when you're watching this, so the pandemic hopefully is in the rearview mirror and behind us, maybe not. But when in 2022 and 2021, Republicans were far more likely to oppose mask mandates, but they're more likely to support voter identification laws, so that when you go to a poll, you have to show your ID to verify who you are. And so I'll ask members of the Republican Party, what's the connection between all of these? What is it about opposition to laws restricting guns, access to guns and ammunition, that makes one also more likely to support restrictions on access to abortions? And what is it about supporting restrictions on access to abortions that makes one more likely to oppose mask mandates? And then what does any of that have to do with supporting voter identification laws? What's the connection? Because I would suggest to you once again that these things are like sort of unconnected issues. Why do Democrats believe what Democrats believe? Why do Republicans believe what Republicans believe? I would suggest to you that they believe that because they're Democrats and because they're Republicans. They've joined these coalitions of convenience, they've joined these respective political parties, and they've come to take on the views of the party as a whole. Not because they're connected in any kind of like ideological, philosophical way. It's just this is what Democrats believe and this is what Republicans believe. There's really nothing connecting them. And that's important to understand, the impact that political parties have and why political parties are important in our political system. Now, if you think that there is a connection, you can always put it on the discussion board, on the political parties and ideology discussion board, and tell me what you think the connection is. But make sure you're not like just making stuff up to try and make them fit, like fitting square pegs into round holes. Because the longer the list that I provide, the more you would see that there's nothing really connected between the things that Democrats believe and the things that Republicans believe, other than the fact that they're Democrats and they're Republicans. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not. Because what's happened is what the parties have done, the two major political parties, is they've created two bundles of issues. We have the Republican issues over here, not necessarily fully connected, but we know what they are, and most people know what they are. Just like you'll see when we talk about theory of issue ownership, most people know what those issues are. And then we have the Democratic bundle over here, and people know what issues they support, generally speaking. Not everybody, and if you're a younger voter, you're probably just like thinking to yourself, well, I have no idea. But what the parties have basically done is they've created a set of bundles that you typically associate with the Democratic Party, another bundle that you associate with the Republican Party. When it comes time to vote then, all the voters need to do is decide which bundle do they prefer. Do they like the collection of issues that we call Democratic issues, or do they like the issues that we call Republican issues, right? And then it's possible to vote. And the reason why this is the case, and this will make more sense after you watch the next video, is that party labels, Democrat, Republican, party labels act as an information shortcut. If you identify with a political party, if you like the Democratic bundle or you like the Republican bundle, and you're getting ready to vote and you know somebody is a Republican or you know somebody is a Democrat, you don't have to do a lot of research to figure out how you're going to vote. If you're sure that you support one bundle over the other, voting is really easy for you. That party label is an information shortcut, and that voting without party labels, if the D, Democrat, doesn't really mean anything to you, and the R for Republican doesn't really mean anything to you because you don't really know what the bundles are. You're not even sure which ones you prefer, right? You like some in one, you like some in the other, right? Going ahead and voting in our political system, you're essentially voting in a world without party labels, where those party labels mean nothing. And in the next video, I'm going to give like a sort of demonstration of what I'm talking about. You're having to make in each election a multiple binary choices. And I'll explain this in the next video. And it requires a lot of time and it requires a lot of energy. But when you're voting with party labels, in a world with party labels, you just have to make one choice. Do I like the Democratic bundle? Do I like the Republican bundle? And that requires far less energy, far less time. So in the next video, I'm going to explain what I mean in more detail, and then we'll return back to this.